Thank you. Before we dive in, two things I wanted to mention. One, I was asked to say that we need to hold these pretty close to our mouth for them to work, so just a reminder on that. The other point is we've got some great expertise here, but everybody is speaking with their private opinions hat on, not necessarily on behalf of companies. So with that, I wanted to start by talking about how the threat environment's changing before we move into solutions. And Rahul, you had mentioned you were working on a survey about the evolving threat environment. If you could start with maybe some highlights from that.
Sure. Thank you, Peter, and pleasure to have you guys. Thank you so much. Still you are sitting after such a long day. So I think that the person who introduced me, so just to let you a little bit about the company so that you can understand the context from where whatever I will be sharing, from what experience I will be sharing. So we are a company of 140 people. We have 200 customers globally. Our work is to make sure that for the CXO levels, how you can quantify cyber risk after investing so much amount of money into your infrastructure. At the end of the day, how you will quantify that, how it's securing more. For example, if I ask you, what is your battery status of your phone right now? You can say 10%, 20%. But if I ask you, how secure is your phone right now? You don't have a straight answer for that. So this same problem we are solving for the global organization. So coming back to the question, our threat intel team, I think working from 6 months on a research where we come up with we analyzed a top 60 plus hacks from the last 5 years. And especially on the cloud, because that's the SaaS and cloud is the future. What we analyzed, Peter, there that 87% of the hacks which are happened in the last 5 years, they happened because of the misconfiguration on the cloud. Just to set an example for the technical people, like S3 buckets. Most of the S3 buckets was publicly accessible. The data was publicly available. And users think that the services provided by the service provider, it can be any cloud provider, is by default secure, which is not the case, because to enhance your security with respect to your region, the number of attacks coming in India might be different from the number of attacks, or the nature of the attacks in US is different. So they give certain security features. It's not like you bought it, you plugged it, and you're secure. It's a shared responsibility for the company's security team to configure them according to their infrastructure. And that was a very enlightening facts, and we'll be publishing reports soon on that part. So I think the human part plays a very important role. I always say that you can fix any technology, but there is always a problem with the human nature to call to action, be it from your SMS which you got from scamsters or so and so forth. So either it's greed, either it's the ignorance, or either it's the curiosity to know more about what it is exactly, which is causing the biggest damage, I guess.
Great, thank you. Sailja, would you have more thoughts on how threats are changing recently?
Yeah, so thank you, Peter, for the question. As Rahul rightly mentioned, right? We all witnessed very much after the pandemic. The primary space we all are living is in the digital space. And everyone is connecting remotely, and this is causing a lot of chaos in the market because we are not prepared for this in the first place, even the organizations, even the people aspect, as Rahul was rightly mentioning. And when you look into the threats, humans can be the weakest and can also be the toughest or the best links in the entire ecosystem. When you're not aware of so many things that is happening, for example, as he also mentioned, the misconfigurations are developing an application. The days are gone when security has to be taken lightly because the threat landscape is growing, and the only news I was seeing, at least I'm a security profession for sure, I also look for the news every day, but during the pandemic, I don't have to really search. It is hitting the headlines every day. One of the other companies ransomed. And when we have the border tensions, unlike the earlier days, they're just targeting our critical infrastructure. So the entire dynamics is changing when it comes to the threat landscape, starting from people, starting from government, starting from corporates, starting from enterprises. So there's many more miles to go for everyone. And in the entire picture, I believe more than the tools and the technology, people play a dominant role if we have to really stand up and combat all these threats.
Thank you. In fact, you mentioned ransomware, which I believe is something Prasad had some thoughts on.
So just wanted to explain, again, like Rahul, the company, Akamai, we do content delivery, cybersecurity, and compute. So that's the latest thing we got into. But we have a view of the industry data, and I just wanted to zoom out a bit into the local industry of India and talk about a couple of things which are showing up a lot recently. One is API attacks. I think the economy is relying more and more on APIs, application programming interfaces. And sometimes it's mandated by the government. They'll put in a payment interface or something. But sometimes it's just for public service, right? You're going about your daily life with payments and other things using APIs. So that's under big attack. The other one is ransomware. She already mentioned it. And it's a very lucrative business. You would think these people are amateurs. They're not. They're a very well-organized cartel. It's a lucrative business to do it these days. The average ransom that they seek per hit these days is about $1 million. So that's serious money, and they're all organized. So I think those are two big areas to look at, especially locally, if not globally.
I think that's very interesting, especially about how organized they are. I was surprised that a lot of the poorly worded scam emails are poorly worded on purpose because they're trying to pre-qualify their targets as people foolish enough to go through with it. So there's no accidents. There's a lot of professionalism.
Organized criminals.
Regrettable, but Leela, I wanted to see if you had additional thoughts on changing threats and perhaps related to how work from home has kind of shifted the nature of that.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Just adding on to what the other co-panelists had mentioned, the threat landscape had definitely multiplied or changed exponentially. At the onset of the pandemic, I don't think, representing the industry that I come from, BFSI, services companies, the religion is no for everything and only yes for, check those one or two things, and then that is what is allowed. Come March 2019, 2020, and then you had no choice. You need to serve your client needs to get his money or whatever. The markets have to run, and so everything was allowed. And that really, I think Shailaja and every one of them had really touched upon it. So there is a different beast in the room, and how do we really go about it? Beyond the technology, I think it is about people is the key thing. Coming from BFSI, it is more conventional in nature in terms of compliance. If I can take a segue and then share a short story. Long years back, I was hearing to Abul Kalam, Dr. Abul Kalam, late. So he was, 2 or 3 conferences, he would narrate this time and again in terms of compliance. How do you really drive the point home? Rameshwaram, a remote town in south of India, known for pilgrimage as well as the other thing is fishing, very good at. So this family, they had about a handful of fishing boats. Each boat would have 10 fishermen. Every morning, 5 o'clock, 5 a.m. in the morning, they go out, venture out to the sea, come back by 6 p.m. Every morning, the businessman, his brother, would stand out and talk through the entire do's and don'ts. The entire checklist is narrated. This you're doing to the fishermen who live by the seaside, right? So from a compliance perspective, that's a huge thing, especially on the people front. Technology can change, technology can provide limited solutions, and especially when the landscape, the perimeters have diminished. Landscape is, every day it is a new thing. People have mentioned, government is offering the gateways and every other thing. Even organizations, BFSIs, are forced to do certain things which the Bible would never have, their Bible would have never allowed. So that's my perspective.
Excellent. And I think that's a great segue into more things we can do to help address these challenges. And I'd like to focus first, as you mentioned, on the users. Would someone like to start on what we can do to help you? Rahul, please go for it.
So I think like my profile mentioned, our company made an application known as Save Me. So it's completely free for everyone, for the consumers in India and globally. So let me ask you a question. Let's make it a two-way conversation. How many of you, raise your hands, how many of you are trained to use a smartphone when they started? Social media? how much time you spend on these things in a day? Most of the times. So imagine you're driving something which you've never been trained of, you don't know who will hit you, how will it hit you, so on and so forth. This is the problem statement. And how to tackle that? To tackle that, I think the biggest and I think important thing is, Peter, that the first thing when you go home, make sure, I'll give you tips so that you can do it for you and organization. Enable two-factor authentication on all your social media. Not by SMS, but just a small. With mobile authentication application, because if your mobile is compromised, because we are morely famous of showing mobile hacking on the TV in case someone have seen that. If I hack your phone, then it's very easy to suck up your messages, and whenever you get any OTP, we'll be able to see that. And if I have the OTP of your Gmail, now your Gmail is connected to your Facebook, LinkedIn, and all the accounts. Imagine the same thing in your company. Small example, one of my friend in the lockdown, he just tweeted to his friends, can anyone please help me with a Netflix account? Like all of you, who buys their own, right? So, sorry, Netflix. So, but you carry a Netflix account from your friends, right? And he went to another extent, he goes publicly asking, can please someone give me? Now, the funny thing is that earning decently, but I don't know why he need it. Now, like everyone mentioned, that's organized way of, like sir mentioned. There's a phishing known as spear phishing. On the basis of your interest, how they will trap you. Within 15 minutes, he got an email so legit, which says that your company, while you're working from home, has given you a Netflix account for 6 months. Please log in with your company username and ID to claim that. He logged in. Next page shows, oh, sorry, the offer has been expired. He forgot about it. Suddenly, only thing which saved them is the entire company's policy under the compliance is they should be behind 2FA. He got a message OTP. If the OTP was not there, the person will go into his account, and from there they will pivot within the organization. So this is the problem statement. Though we are using smartphone, smart home, smart this, smart that, are we that smart enough to use that? Ask yourself. And I think that's the same question entire organization has to put into us. So your takeaway when you go home, there's an application known as Save Me, 100% free. We are not charging anything, no ads. Just, well, 100% secure. That's the problem being a hacker. Nobody trusts you, But yeah, so you believe my words, trust me. And and especially for your kids, please make sure that they should know. In our company, I'll give an example. If anyone in their kids, they want to go to Facebook, they have to go to that application and do a course before going to the social media. And so, that is the same thing you do in the companies.
Prasad, I believe you had some other more technical solutions to build on with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would start with the user piece. I think that's really important. And I think it's a part of the culture you have to inculcate in your people, whether it's like you do patching for your servers, whether you take care of your zero-day vulnerabilities. But coming back to the technical stuff, that's where I think you can invest as a company in a couple of things. Typically, we call north to south the traffic coming from users to applications, right? That's a term. And east to west is the communication between applications and servers. And there's a concept called zero trust architecture. People can look it up. It's public out there. And what you do is you verify each and every connection. So zero trust doesn't mean you don't trust your users. I think when in this new world of remote, right, where are too many devices, too many users, too many applications, you want to make sure everybody coming in, every connection is verified. And you can use multi-factor authentication, you can use single sign-on, all those layer in nicely. So that covers your north to south, which is users coming into your applications. Your east to west is some of the ransomware stuff, where people come into your supply chain, they can enter one of your servers, but then they can traverse, east to west to other servers, and then start hurting you and asking you for money. That's where you have to use some software-defined security. You can be very agile. You can move groups of servers with access to each other based on business need. So between those two of zero trust architecture, I think people would be able to get to a technical point. Again, user stuff is really important, but if you want to layer in technical solutions, that's what I would suggest.
Excellent, thank you. Maybe next we can move to Sailja with security by design and how that plays into starting this from the beginning instead of trying to stick security on at the end.
Yeah, sure. As the panelist rightly mentioned, right? Many of us are not trained to do so many things, and we still do it. And in the organization, since I'm coming in from the large enterprise, when we are trying to conceptualize a product, those days when I started, the early days of my security career, everything is done, dusted. In the last final release, we have few tools, some static, some dynamic. Not necessarily all of them are valid. Do some tests, no prior one, prior two, I'm good to go. And now everybody is talking about shifting left. Right from the time, even I have to tell you my personal experiences, even though I am designated as the security head, security lead, product owners happily used to try to avoid me from inviting me into the conversations. Because the first thing I say, hey, you have your personal data, so you have to have GDPR in place. And you're also having the Chinese customers, so you have to have CCSL things in place. So they don't want to hear all this from me. Because for them, it's like the earlier they can get their products into the market, it's all good for them. But for me, being the person, and at times I also used to do a lot of assessments at home, and my kids are like, you're being so, they used to tell me, like, you're being so stupid, you're being so, talking like a policewoman in the room, and you're very, they just they're not liking it, because I used to tell them, I cannot, sign this off, and the only thing they always used to hear from me is, Mama, this is being so rude of you. And then I have to really explain them, this is why my company is paying me enough, I have to be rude in the room, and to make the long story short, now, at least people reach out to me, they invite me into the meetings, they know I am important, and without me they can't get things done. And the beauty of this is, whenever we start with a small POC, even from the POC is nothing but a proof of concept. When I'm trying to bring one of the offering to my customer, then we start thinking about how we can do it best. What are the best process in place? And it's again in the mindset of the people, because I also heavily work on the security mindset, because there is a framework called PPT, People, Process and Technology. Now after the pandemic, everybody is running behind, onboarding every tool possible. You have the SOC, you have the firewalls, you have everything in place. But having all of this, things can still go wrong. If your people are not trained enough, if they're not even trained enough to use the technology. For example, as we see, there are a lot of misconfigurations all around the place. So right from the beginning of we are conceptualizing something, we start with the process of onboarding and doing the assessments and trying to understand the technical feasibility, whether the security features are available for this type of architecture. Is there any open source? Is it approved in the first place? Because I think after the Log4j, we all know about it. We don't have to explain so much about it. And I used to tell my architects, it's like, everyone is working together. My product owner knows, okay, if I have to bring this solution into these markets, these are the, compliance guidelines. And my architect knows, okay, if I have to do this technical architecture feasibility study, these all are the security standards which have to be applied. On the top, my developers are also assigned to understand if I have to use some open sources. Are they available in the approved list? If not, how do I go about it? How do I apply for my approvals? Because in the end, I just want to give a seamless experience to my entire team, still sitting on their commitments to the customer, to the market, not letting them delay the process, because I have to follow all this bunch. In this, I believe all of us have an equal rail to play with, because it's not me in the end, it's the entire stakeholder approach, like the product owners, the architects, the QEs. Even we train our QEs so well to really think like a hacker. I tell them, you just go and break it. If you really are mad at someone, the best thing is you break his application and show him or her. And they really do it, and So this is what we do, and I believe when you have this kind of a mindset, this kind of an environment, if you can create in the organizations, and then it's going to be a lot more fun doing this security and privacy by design.
I love that, because I've kind of lived the other side of that, where I've forgotten to invite security to early meetings. And I can vouch that it is so much more amicable and painless when you work together from the start. But I'd like to pull on another thread for a minute, and that's more about some of the regulatory changes at the moment and how those are affecting the security landscape in general. Leela, is that something that you could speak to for a bit?
Yeah, I can touch upon. For us, especially compliance in the BFSI industry, someone facing the markets every day, about $35 trillion worth trade is made on the platform that we work for a week. Imagine the compliance pain or compliance officers to be a pain in the room along with the developer network. So yes, definitely, I would, it is a known fact that we have a host of compliances, each industry, be it the healthcare industry, be it the financial services or whosoever. Long years back in one of these forums, and also, sorry, so on one of these forums it was deliberated that why can't we come out with something like a credit rating agency for the compliance standard, so that the pain of standing against every audit, every client audit, every vendor audit, you go through it, time and again, and you build an army of internal consultants and auditors facing them and then answering them. Can the user industry go mature the overall model to a credit rating format where XYZ organization is rated as so and so, so he need not, this organization need not go through these things. So I think some of those, we still await while the threat landscape changes, technology evolution happens, Web 1, 2, 3, everything is happening. But I think those things, those archaic models, I wish to hear more from the co-panelists on this piece. That's where I would go with it.
Sure. Any follow-ups on the regulation?
So I think just to add into it, in our experience, I think what we have seen that the nature of compliance is designed is to make sure that you follow certain guidelines from the regulatory bodies according to their experience they have seen to enhance your overall security. But the one thing which if you see all companies like Capital One, this and that, all were compliant at that time when they got hacked. Is it a compliance problem? No. The implementation is the problem. For example, compliance says whenever you are saving critical credentials of the user, it can be PII data, it can be payment information, it should be hashed in nature. Now, if the auditor is going and seeing it is an MD5 hash, compliance says tick in the box. But that hash is of 1996. You see the difference? So the person who is doing it, the guidelines of are we going to satisfy the regulatory bodies with the checklist, or are we really want to implement something which will do a real change into the ecosystem? That is one we need to understand. And second is, after even implementing, whether it is really contributing to all the verticals in the organization. It's not only, mostly it's on technology, but it is the people, it's the third party nowadays, because when we went into lockdown, most of the third party comes to the picture to make you run the business. And if you see the Okta hack recently, that the third party was compromised and that security company was breached. So where that was covered in the compliance, right? So there are so many new use cases which being introduced into lockdown. And in our experience, what we have seen that how you will define those new use cases and track those new use cases and put it into the compliance to make a difference. And that is something I think will be good.
Yeah, just want to add on, that's a great point. Actually, sometimes your business depends on a compliance, so X $100 million are based on PCI or something, and you'd have to get it and you'll invest your resources. But I think having a real-time view of your critical business resources, software assets, and actually tracking it for the board, for the management, not doing it once in a year, once in 6 months. Really being on top of that profile is, I think, very important. I think that's the point he was also making.
Definitely. Well, I have a couple more questions I'd love to ask, but I want to make sure we don't shortchange the audience. So if there's any questions from the audience, we'd be happy to field those for a minute. Yes, please.
Hi everyone. Very good evening. This is Mekla from Catalytics Data. And I just wanted to ask, what is, what are the security and compliance standard for a SaaS, SaaS and PaaS, because they are coming into picture also for AR and VR and metaverse, because it is very much important with a huge amount of data, everything personally connected to us and very private to us, but yes, they can directly access anything, anywhere, in real time.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Sailja, please.
Yes, yeah. So thank you for the wonderful question. Yes, we know, like, we are changing in the tip of, blink, like the way how we expected. The innovation is taking us far, far ahead. And especially when we look into this metaverse world, right, it is out of my interest. I'm also working on it. That's wherein everybody is pointing it to me. And yes, in this AR and VR world, if you look into the composition of the entire metaverse, for example, it's made of blockchain is there, AI, VR is there. You have this 5G and 6G coming in place, and so on and so forth. It's a huge composition of all the edge tech technologies, including cloud computing, IoT, and so on and so forth. But as I said in my previous example as well, right, sometimes the sad part of the story is the technologies start advancing and then the security has to chase them. Yeah, even that holds good with the regulators as well. But to a large extent, for example, India is also coming up with the PDPB privacy bill, which is similar to the European one. And most of the countries around the world, they already have this privacy laws in place. So when the metaverse is taking its shape and form, it is going to take much more personal data than we expected, the fingerprints, the eye retinas and everything. It's going to be real. Yeah, sooner or later, it's really going to be real. And yes, there are so many organizations that are working towards it, but especially I am concerned about the human aspects, the human data, because now we all know data has become the new gold. Yeah, today morning I'm doing a session with small children, and we're also explaining them, the way how gold is exponentially going in terms of its price. The data is also, gaining a lot of value when it goes into the wrong hands or in the right hands. So yes, for sure, there are a lot of regulatories that are available, even from the technical point of view, right? For example, when I talk about IoT, the chip manufacturers, like how they're being manufactured, and for sure, all of us in the room know, if the chip is manufactured by some of the countries, it is not accepted in healthcare and so on and so forth. So for sure, there has to be a due diligence in the room, whoever is working on that entire, ecosystem of all the technologies. And there are many terms available. Not necessarily we have to wait for compliance. It has to be security first mindset. You are equally socially responsible in the end. It's not only for the enterprise, right? It's for day-to-day life. When people get that maturity of understanding, like you don't have to wait some of the governments telling you this is mandatory to bake this kind of controls, this kind of things. We all know it by now. What is required in a chip, what is required in AI and ML. You have to be doing this responsible AI, right? When you have all these pieces bringing up together on the table, I think we can achieve it a lot more than we expect. But in the end, everyone has to work together and then work towards it, not really waiting for someone with a stick or someone with a penalty. If you violate this, if you violate that, we have to come out of that mindset in the first place. Like, we are not doing things for the regulators. We are doing things for our own self and for our own enterprises to have a better life.
Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. I believe I saw a few other hands up. Oh, perfect.
Hi. Going back to your security by design concept, right? We do threat modeling, we do vulnerability scanning, pen testing. We are dependent on a lot of tools and then the manual work. What are some of your experiences and guidance, for the product teams, to manage this PDLM cycle?
Yeah. So yeah, this is very personal to me because threat modeling is something I was doing it so often. See, when we do threat modeling, right? For example, once I was doing threat modeling for one of the application which has to be done on the shop floor. Yeah, and then the architect was new. I was part of the hiring process when we hired him, and he doesn't have a clue about what happens on the shop floor. He knows in and outs of his architecture, he knows everything about it. And then I was also asking him, this application is meant for the end users, and he even doesn't know how many shifts are there on the shop floor. I have to tell him there are 3 shifts. 8 hours, and there are 3 shifts. And then when this person A is handing this device to this person B, how is this transfer happening? He's clueless. Because when we are doing a threat modeling, right, I think moving forward, since you're talking from the product owner perspective, right, we have to think about the big picture. Yes, there are technologies, there are controls in place. The same goes with the IoT. Once I was doing threat modeling for one of the IoT teams, and then I was asking them, what is the threshold limit for this specific boiler in the room? When is it going to blast? And what kind of signals are going to go back? Because in the end, for security, people's life is the top priority than anything else. So we have to take a holistic picture of the entire business. Not you can have everything the best, but in the end, if there's a failure from the human aspect, everything will go for a toss. So that is what I tell them. And on the top of it, as I said, don't only look after for compliances and all that. Don't think like you have to, for example, there are privacy laws, right? Today or tomorrow you're going to enter the markets. Try to have decent levels of anonymization and then some better controls in place. That is how you're going to achieve. And as Peter rightly mentioned, if you're not inviting them the early stages of your development, you definitely have to have them. There's no other go in the current era now. So it's going to really delay your process. The earlier you onboard them, it's really going to be smooth and helping you out.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, just wanted to add, this is a common question from CISOs about resourcing for security. While you have a Tiger team inside your company, I think it's very advisable also to get external consultants who would tell you the industry benchmarks. Sometimes, you don't know everything, and it's okay to admit that and say that, we'll collaborate. And whether you have them on retention, you get them in for a project, whatever. I think that's a very wise thing to do to avoid all the, downstream problems.
Excellent. I think we have time for one last question. Please.
Hi, my name is Nishan Bhatnagar. I'm working as a Vice President in Broadridge. My question is a bit tangential. Is there any representation by industry to, say, Ministry of Education or state boards, education board, where we put in cybersecurity as a subject, right from childhood? Because the Generation Z and the millennials, they are born with the iPads and iPhones in their hand. So if it is inculcated, what I feel is cybersecurity is one thing I learned in the age of 30s. If they are taught right from schools, the problem that's the last defense line is the human being himself. They are the one who breaks it, and they are the one who are the defense. So if we inculcate this as a part of education, it will be a great for India and rest of the industry. So is there any representation from the industry to the government of India and to the boards where they can inculcate this as a part of curriculum or pedagogy?
So, sure. So like you said that way back when I was 30, you still look 30, so that's a compliment one. And second one is coming to the answer. I think government has done so much good in terms of awareness. I'll give you a small example. How many of you watch IPL? Many of you. Have you seen RBI's ad, RBI Kehta Hai? That's also a part of the campaign. Cybercrime.gov.in. Most people don't know. This is a website where you can report the crime. Again, I'm repeating, cybercrime.gov.in. It's the most used and active today, and government is so serious about this. 8 months back, maybe I will not be able to recommend it because it was too slow. But now, as you register any complaint there, immediately an officer will be assigned to you. Second, so many initiatives like Cyber Dost. There is a Twitter handle for the Indian government where they do these initiatives and tell students to follow them. Apart from this, from a cybersecurity curriculum, there is a huge budget on cybersecurity expenditure, and right now the cyber expenditure bill will come maybe next quarter. There will definitely be a huge budget in terms of the awareness from schools, and will be like a chapter in the school about with the computers on security. So my niece is there, I can see her book, and there's a little bit part about security. They are already in private schools. But from a scale point of view, from the government initiatives, 100% they are doing it, and you will soon see how to do that.
Yeah, and also to add to that, personally, out of my passion giving back to the community, I am also part of a non-profit, Women in Cybersecurity and Privacy. We are working with the Telangana government. There they picked up some of the students from the rural areas. I think that's 1,360 schools. I'm also one of the training all the children. And now there's the next step in order to retain and sustain this model. Now we have the trainers, we have the students, we have the teachers. We are also planning to have cyber clubs. And we will have a weekly initiatives, and there it's all about talking about the latest trends in the market, like what kind of attacks, what kind of threats that are going around, and how do you mitigate them, how do you overcome them. I think slowly it's picking up, and as Rahul also mentioned, there are huge budgets available with the government, and government also knows about it, and there are a lot of measures taken step by step.
Even industry, just to add to what Shailaja had mentioned, NASSCOM and DSCA themselves are partnering with many educational institutions in propagating this. Definitely, it is not meeting the scale, may not be meeting the scale, but yeah, there is.
Excellent. I think that brings us up on time. I really appreciate hearing from all of you. I think this has made it very clear that this is really a daunting and important challenge, but by starting right at the beginning and covering things very holistically, looking at the human and the technical across the whole surface that you're dealing with, and finding advice from the right experts, this challenge, we can rise to meet it. So thank you very much.